Good evening, and welcome to Having a Drink with Mink, Halloween edition. As always, I'm your host, Jason Mink, bringing you another 20-odd minutes of festive and fear-fraught fun. Before we begin, make sure that your costume is flame retardant and that you brought the big pillowcase for candy, because we're hitting all the houses on the street tonight. Hallows' Eve is a modern comics character, but don't hold that against her. She's cool. Readers first met Janine Godby in the pages of Spider-Man: The Lost Years, introduced as clone Ben Reilly's girlfriend. However, after being given a bag of magic Halloween masks by a demon, Janine stepped into her own as Hallows' Eve. Now separated from Reilly and wanted by the law, Janine assumes a variety of strange identities and powers in her bid to navigate the ever-expanding Marvel Universe. That's the Mink Notes version of it anyway, enough to get you up to speed for our look at the action figure. Released this year as part of Hasbro's Spider-Man Marvel Legends line, Hallows' Eve was offered on a large card evocative of vintage figures of the past. No windowless boxes here. It's a nice presentation that shows you all you get. Might have been nice to get a little more, but we'll circle back to that. Off the card, Hallows' Eve stands 6 inches tall. She's offered on the new pinless female body, which means she doesn't have ugly pegs where her limbs are jointed. This is a relatively recent move for Hasbro's Marvel Legends, and one to be celebrated. Previous pinned bodies often appeared ill-proportioned, and worse still, tended to warp. Sure, Popeye likes to go swimming with bow-legged women, but most collectors prefer something more aesthetically pleasing. And you get that here. Eve cuts a sporty profile without the exaggerated proportions female comics characters often tend to have. While it's a nice change of pace, this means that there isn't enough volume to provide needed definition, leaving her arms looking like cardboard tubes from some angles. It's not great, but I've certainly seen worse. The head, hood, and cape elements do most of the visual heavy lifting. The cape is actually more of a scarf, splitting into twin columns down the figure's back. The ends are tattered, with a couple honest-to-gosh holes in there for added effect. There's no real texture to it, but the sculpted details have enough depth to provide a little natural shadow in lieu of paint wash. The hood looks good and, more importantly, seems to fit without being oversized or gappy. Also, I love the jack-o'-lantern hood clasps. It's those little details that make this design sing. While there's not a lot of paint to speak of on this figure, what there is done cleanly and effectively. The mask is a raised detail and adds some real personality. Black paint over white plastic can be a messy affair, but I'm happy to say that my figure came out solid. The flame effects on her thighs are spot on. Would I have liked them to be sculpted elements? Of course, but that sort of dedicated tooling simply isn't in the cards for a character like Eve. Well, not this early in the game, anyway. Eve comes with 2 additional sets of hands, a pair of masks, and her magic satchel, a clever reuse of the previously released Hobgoblin's man purse. The hands come in pairs, 2 for holding, 2 for punching, and 2 for theatrical gestures. The masks come directly from the comic, which is loads of fun. However, they don't really work as you'd expect. Sure, you can jam them in under the seam of Eve's hood, but this doesn't really track. These are holding accessories, and they do work fine for that. At least, until you lose one, like I did. I blame no one but myself, but be wary. If you can't keep track of something the size of a Kellogg's Frosted Flake, then you may just want to keep Eve in the package. As I already lost one, I would have really liked it if Hasbro had thrown in another mask or 2. I mean, it's not like there wasn't room in the package. Yes, tooling is expensive, but at $25, this thing wasn't exactly cheap, and a few more pieces would have made that price go down a little easier. Hallows' Eve has 18 points of articulation, the standard setup for a figure of this type. It's all pretty functional, although extreme positions might be difficult to pull off. My figure's knee joints were especially tight out of the package. In fact, I may have stressed the plastic a bit in the process of getting these shots. But when it comes to action figures, you buy the ticket and you take the ride. Happily, this one is a worthwhile destination, with a wonderful autumnal aesthetic and a compelling gimmick that keeps her from being just another arm waver. Hallows Eve makes my top 10 figure list of the year. Moving on to a less joyful topic, I got beat up last week. Oh sure, I'm okay now, but at the time, it was pretty rough. The worst part is, it all could have been avoided. After all, I know better than to take stupid chances. If only I'd kept walking. If only I'd run. If only I hadn't stopped to read Absolute Batman. So why did I do it? Well, like many bad choices in life, the rationale is no longer clear. After all, I'm an old guy who likes old comics. I abandoned my pull list long ago, and for a good reason. Constant reboots, pointless event books, and overhyped titles that were canceled before their 6th issue led to burnout and a bad taste in my mouth. All of my favorite characters had died, retired, or lost the plot. The world that I once knew was unrecognizable, the creators I had followed now bitter, twisted reflections of themselves. And with every reinvention, the needle was pushed further into the red, with every crisis and ultimatum driving things further from the core, until all that was left was noise and dissonance. To wit, and spoilers ahead, Absolute Batman is DC Comics' Hail Mary in the 4th quarter, one final play in a bid to forestall the inevitable. Forget what you know about Gotham. Gone are the rising spires and other Gothic trappings of a city in decay, replaced by ugly modern architecture that could be anywhere. In fact, the mystique and mythic nature of the fabled city has been so expertly excised its absence is actually used as a story point. However, instead of coming off as clever, this feels exactly like what it is, a meta-esque decampment on the creator's part to defy audience expectation. After all, what is Batman without his city? The short answer is The Punisher, only spikier. A familiar grim monologue gets us up to speed, with the no-nonsense narrator gravely establishing a sense of presence and setting the scene for the story to come. Only, this is a swerve. This isn't Batman talking. It's Alfred Pennyworth, recast as an assassin in the employ of some mysterious power broker. That's right, the humble butler who used to bring young Master Bruce his milk and cookies is now a cold-blooded mercenary. Edgy. Speaking of Bruce, have you ever encountered someone and thought, wow, there's a lot more to this guy than just what's on the surface? With Bruce, it's the opposite. There's so little character present you can audibly hear a sucking sound as you read. The singular quality is presumably meant to convey a kind of quiet, primal intensity a la Conan the Barbarian, but instead, this comes off as underdeveloped and obvious. While he's presented as moody and soulful, this Bruce is just a copy-paper cipher designed as a stand-in for the teenage reader's revenge fantasies. No joke. In a scene that reads like a 6th grader's fan fiction, our protagonist peels the Bat logo from his chest, only to use it as an axe blade to dismember his opponent. The hero does this. But wait, you ain't seen nothing yet. The art baffles me. This is meant to be the lead book in a new publishing initiative, so why is it so mundane? The art is manga-esque, but crossed with the worst aspects of modern Western storytelling. The line work is basic and cartoonish, any detail sketchy and ill-considered. And the proportions. Why are Batman's legs drawn thicker than his upper body? Why is Barbara Gordon suddenly 12 years old? Stylization is fine if you have a keen understanding of composition and anatomy, but I'm not seeing that here. But it's not just the line work. Remember how Batman, the animated series, used black as the base color for backgrounds? In the cartoon, it provided a sense of atmosphere and immersion, generating ambience and allowing the brighter colored elements to really pop. The same trick is attempted here, but within the confines of random and irregularly sized panels, it smothers what is already minimal illustration. I get it, we're going for a Frank Miller PKR thing, but there's just not enough compositional language present to make it speak. I'm not saying this as any sort of graphic storytelling expert or professional critic. I'm speaking as a reader. It's dark and ugly and confusing to look at. Are these appealing qualities to modern readers? Or is DC just hoping that they throw a bunch of ink on paper and that enough rubes will see bats that they keep on buying it? The colors are flatter than day-old Faygo. When confronted with 7,000 plus possible color choices, the answer shouldn't be brown. I'm not saying more is better, but if you choose to limit your options in such a way, you need to have a stronger chromatic palette. Because this is mud. Sure, blue and red are present, but more is voyeuristic onlookers to the proceedings. And let's not get started on the negative space. You could charge for it by the inch. At the end of the day, these were all choices. The truncated and phlegmy characterization, the random, unbalanced art, and the abysmal colors left me wondering, who is this for? What's here for a new reader to identify and resonate with? What remains for a long-time reader who simply wishes to keep buying and enjoying the comics? Neither master is served, leaving this a beast with no purpose. If this is the best DC can do, then I say, let it fail. Stop with the comics altogether and produce something useful, like Birdcage Liner. After all, parrots need to crap way more than we need another crummy Batman title. If you ever wanted to see a slope-nosed, emotionally mute hero blast his metaphorical father in the face with a dozen bat-shaped razor blades, then this is the book for you. If not, save your shiny dimes for something more worthwhile, like a beta reader of Jackie's Jokers. You might actually get some enjoyment out of that. Next, let's cast the yoke back to the shadowy days of October 1979 and this H.P. Lovecraft-inspired issue of Heavy Metal. And this is a very different animal from what you might get today. There's nary a tentacle to be seen, but much in the way of outsider horror. It's far from a literal adaptation in most cases, but captures the spirit in a way that few tributes have. I got lucky and discovered Lovecraft the right way, stumbling across a cache of moldering books in a friend's basement. In the dim light of a 40-watt bulb, he and I pored over the contents of a split-open garbage bag, his father's old Lancer paperback spilling out onto the dirty concrete floor. Remarkably, those lurid covers were barely suggestive of the true horrors that lay within. In those pages, I discovered that perspective was of my own making. Why should the moon merely be full when it could be gibbous? Tall is good, but cyclopean is better. Suddenly, language had power. Words weren't simply a means to an end, they were a gateway to those weird worlds that had long beckoned me. Lovecraft's influence is shadowy and pervasive. It reaches deep to the outsider in us all. Containing art by Mobius, Juliet, Walter Simonson, and Arthur Zadiam, this one is well worth your time. If you can find it, track it down, as our format simply can't convey the ancient and eldritch power within its pages. Recommended. Let's wrap things up with a look at a few more pre-code classics. As the old saying goes, there's always room for Jell-O, something Merrill Dane discovers all too soon in The Living Slime. Escaping from a southern prison, Dane flees into the Everglades. With the bloodhound snapping at his heels, he plunges further into the swamp. It is there Dane discovers the green slime in the process of consuming an errant rabbit. His terror is mitigated by the appearance of the bloodhounds, and he runs, unaware of the bit of slime on his shoe. Dane stumbles upon a shack, but the old man within refuses to admit him until he wipes the attractant slime off. The old man reveals, once the slime touches you, you absorb the characteristics of its last meal, in this case being the aforementioned jackrabbit. Infused with its speed, Dane makes his escape from the swamp and his pursuers. Changing his name, he starts a new career in a new town, but old habits die hard. The escaped criminal decides he'd have a better head for business if he exposed his coworker to the slime and tricks him into a hunting trip into the swamp, although Jones here refers to it as a date. Aww. Before he can even get some dinner out of the deal, Jonesy is slimed, and Dane absorbs his knowledge. He returns to the city and is quickly promoted, but still isn't satisfied. He cons the world's greatest scientist, politician, and military strategist into a return trip to the bayou, but this time things go horribly awry. When the three men are consumed, Dane is unable to remove a fleck of the slime from under his fingernail, leading to his own flesh-melting demise in the murky swamp. Dang, Pogo never warned us about this. Benny the Rat is perhaps the most aptly named gangster that you'll meet tonight. He's on the run after crossing up the mob, scurrying around the waterfront looking for a bolt hole. At the same time, Professor Ogden is transporting a crate of his experimental serum designed to reanimate dead tissue, and they'd do well to be careful with it. Just then, Nails and his gangster cronies arrive, but Benny thinks he's safe, as they won't open fire in a crowd. Surprise! Nails is a trick shot and drops the professor's crate square on Benny's dome, punching his ticket before he can even hit the Lido deck. The liquid from the shattered trunk slowly filters out, commingling with both Benny's blood and that of a nearby rodent. Before you can say Tuvix, the two are fused into an unholy rat-like hybrid. But instead of getting all lachrymose, Benny scampers off to make the best of his new verminous life. First, he tracks down Nails and his crew. With fang teeth ripping and sharp claws slashing, Benny deals out vicious death. But while their leader gets away, the rest of the gang do not. The men are slain, but Nails' mole, Katie, is so frightened she ages 40 years. Soon after, Benny digs out a burrow, hiding the dead gangsters away so that he might continue his spree. The next few days sees a new sort of crime wave, one so unusual no one knows how to stop it. Well, no one except Nails, who plots his own revenge. He seeks Benny out in his burrow and makes a deal. All the gangs have wised up, and they want Benny the Rat to lead them. Surprisingly, Benny goes along with this. Seems rats aren't any smarter than people. To illustrate the point, he eats the steak and french fries Nails brings him, which of course is poisoned. Being a rat is hard enough without you enforcing harmful stereotypes, Benny. Okay, here's one last popcorn ball for your bag. Long thought lost, this is the recently transferred 1980s horror classic, The Attack of the Killer Eastergrass, starring myself and a few childhood chums. Enjoy. From all of us to all of you, have a happy and horrific Halloween. I'm Jason Mink. Now get off of my porch.